The one thing more distracting in this movie than the little stupid kids who wouldn't shut up in the theater was Beyonce's voice acting. Welcome to the objective review of The Lion King, or The Lion Kings, as I will be reviewing both of these, mostly the 2019 live action version, but I will be comparing and contrasting the two of them. And to do that, I break a movie down into 6 categories and assign weights depending on the genre to have the most honest, unbiased, objective review as possible. So let's start with the first category of story.
Simba, you must remember who you are.
The 2019 Lion King has pretty much the exact same story as the 1994 one. And it's still a really good story with a lot of treachery, a lot of backstabbing, just a lot of grand ideas about the circle of life and where's your place in the world. There's a lot of great themes in it, as always. And I think in both of these films, Simba's development is a little weaker for me. It is a really good development. He deals with his past. He deals with the guilt he feels over being responsible for his father's death. But I feel like in both films, he doesn't really drive the narrative. It's everyone else kind of forcing him and nudging him one way, whether it's Scar manipulating him or whether it's Nala being like, hey, we need you to be the king. There's not a really good catalyst for his change. The thing I will say about the story is that if you take out all the themes and everything, this is a story about a bunch of lions fighting over a rock, and that is not that interesting by itself. And when it comes to the live action version, because they kept it so realistic, that oftentimes that's what it felt like, and that's not interesting. But I think that's more of a knock on the directing. So for both of these, since they are pretty much the exact same story, they both get an 8 out of 10. That's on to emotion. It's sad to say, but the live action version is fairly emotionless. They stuck so realistic to these animals, and they do absolutely look beautiful, but they have no expression from like the nose up. There's barely anything. I mean, moments that just hit you so hard as a kid, specifically the moment where Mufasa dies, spoiler alert, you should know this already, but the moment where Mufasa dies, it doesn't hit you the same way in the live action version. When he falls off that cliff, there's no sadness in his eye. There's no feeling of betrayal. In an animated film, you got such a wide range of expressions that helped you connect with these characters. But here, it's really hard to connect with these cats that talk every now and then. I feel like the animated film did a much better job when it comes to the emotion. It gets a 9.5 out of 10, while the live action version just gets a 6 out of 10. This is on to action.
We need you.
Now, despite this film trying to keep it so realistic, when it comes to the action, this is where they drop the ball. They still maintain realistic animal movements, and that's not the part you necessarily want to maintain when you're not really showing the more gory things. Granted, it's a kids movie. So when they fought, sometimes it didn't feel like an actual fight, but felt more like pouncing, like animals were just pouncing on each other rather than fighting each other. And on the other hand, the animated film completely exaggerated all these movements. I mean, there's a moment in the gorge when Mufasa jumps out of it. He leaps onto the cliff, just barely holding on. And here, Mufasa like jumps like 3 feet, and he kind of just slowly climbs to the top. Like, that's not as grand. It wasn't as emphatic of a moment. Like, yeah, Mufasa made it. But still, there wasn't that much action in the animated film either. So for the live action version, it gets a 6.5 for action, and the animated version gets a 7 out of 10. Next is on to comedy.
We're here! Oh, everyone calm down, we're here! The backup has arrived!
For the first hour of the live action version, it was fairly humorless. Like, I chuckled a couple times here and there, and then Timon and Pumbaa hit, and Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen completely saved this movie. I absolutely loved them in this. They were hilarious. They had such great comedic timing. I mean, I think they riffed on a lot of stuff together. They just worked really well together. It's interesting because in the animated film, I find Timon and Pumbaa to be very annoying. Like, Timon is just kind of all in his own head. He's just a tiny bit selfish. In the animated film, I find the most humor comes from the hyenas. I mean, gosh, I really miss them saying just the word Mufasa. Like, that cracks me up every single time. But thanks to Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen for their portrayal of Timon and Pumbaa, I was cracking up laughing So many moments in the second half of this film. The comedy gets an 8.5 out of 10, while for the animated version, it gets a 7 out of 10. That's on to acting.
Simba, you have to take your place as king.
Again, Timon and Pumbaa, Billy Eichner, Seth Rogen, they were amazing here acting-wise. They did such a great, incredible job of voice acting to where you knew it was them, but they still encompassed these characters. Donald Glover was good. I wish I got more of him. Like, that's the thing with Simba. I feel like Simba doesn't drive the narrative of this movie that much, and I feel like it was a great opportunity for Donald Glover to do more here, but they didn't really give him that much. They gave him pretty much the exact same thing they gave Matthew Broderick, and I feel like their performances were very similar. Now, on to people who I didn't think did as good of a job. Chiwetel Ejiofor was fine, but he was fairly one note, while Jeremy Irons in the animated film, I think he is flat out amazing. He is like flamboyant, but he's also has so much bravado in him. And again, Beyonce was distracting. All I heard was Beyonce and her performance. I did think she did an incredible job with her duet with Donald Glover and Can You Feel the Love Tonight, but besides that, I really wish she wasn't in this film. Like, part of acting is becoming that character. Like, voice acting is hard. I'm sure a lot of big Hollywood ups, think it's easy. You just walk in the booth and you do it, but it's not. It is just as hard as live action acting is. So for acting, the live action version gets a 7.5 out of 10, while the animated version gets a 9.5 out of 10. That's on to directing. First off, I have to say that the still pictures of this film look amazing. Like, they did such a good job bringing these animals to life that it almost just looks real. Like, it is jaw-droppingly really good. But that being said, while every still image looks good, this is a motion picture. And when these animals are in motion and they're talking, that is absolutely where this movie suffers the most. Like, does anyone remember that Jungle Book movie? I think it was called Mowgli's Story, where they use real animals and they just voice people over it. That's how this movie felt for the first hour. It's interesting because I heard in an interview, Jon Favreau, the director, was saying like he was really nervous about this film, and when he was showing it, he was really nervous in the theater until it got to Timon and Pumbaa, and then all the laughs started to come in and things started to feel more real. And I think it was more than just the laughter that they brought. I think it's because Timon and Pumbaa were so exaggerated with their voice acting and also with their movements that the character models had to mimic and follow that. Because of the realism, the live action version just lacked a lot of color that the original version had. I mean, when that sun is rising, everything that blankets the Pride Lands is just blanketed with this goldness around it. While the sunrise is here, it's just a kind of regular sunrise. Like, to be prepared, like, I could see how they weren't like wanting to have Nazi hyenas and Scar being Hitler, but you know what? Maybe I want Nazi hyenas. I don't know. I never thought I'd say that before, but Nazi hyenas might be needed to make a movie good. Anyway, the music was great in both of them, while I think, again, Be Prepared was the worst one. So I have to give directing a 7.5 out of 10, and for the animated film, it gets a 10 out of 10. That brings our weighted average score for the live action version to a 7.2 out of 10, and the animated version gets a 9.0 out of 10. All right, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think is a better film between these two? Also, what song do you like the best out of The Lion King? Also, random thought, I wish they had used a Circle of Life version from the play in this one because it's really good. Anyway, that's it. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and consider subscribing. And sincerely, thank you for watching. I'm out.